I never thought my life would fall apart on the happiest day of my daughter's life. I was supposed to be celebrating Frances's wedding, the kind of day every mother dreams about. But before the night was over, my husband stood in front of 200 people, raised his glass, and destroyed 35 years of marriage with one announcement. That moment didn't just break my heart. It lit a fire inside me that would change everything. Because while everyone saw a tearful wife standing frozen in her seat, what they didn't see was the woman silently vowing to take back her power. My name is Julia Bruce, and this is the story of how my husband's betrayal turned into his worst nightmare. But before I tell you how he ended up screaming for help while I watched in silence, let me ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to realize they were using you the entire time? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your partner betrayed you like mine did? Please tell me where you are watching from, drop your country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and share it with a friend, because what happened next is something no one saw coming. I still remember the morning of my daughter's wedding as if it happened yesterday, the air crisp, the Ohio sky clear and bright, and the soft scent of roses drifting from the garden outside the Maplewood Country Club in Columbus. Frances had been glowing all week. My little girl, my heart, was marrying the man she said made her feel safe. Watching her slip into her ivory gown, her hair pinned just the way she liked it, I felt a mix of pride and nostalgia. For once, everything seemed right. Randy was already at the venue when I arrived. 35 years of marriage, and yet lately he'd been more like a stranger in my home. Still, I smiled when I saw him, convincing myself that the tension between us was just pre-wedding stress. He looked handsome in his navy suit, his silver hair neatly combed, the same easy charm that had drawn me to him all those years ago. "Big day for our girl," I said softly. He gave a quick nod, not quite meeting my eyes. "Yeah. Big day. I should have known then." The distance in his voice wasn't nerves, it was detachment. The ceremony was beautiful. The piano music, the vows, the laughter, it was everything I wanted for Frances. When she and Bradley said I do, I thought maybe life was giving me a second chance to believe in love again, even if my own marriage wasn't perfect anymore. But that illusion shattered hours later, right after dinner, when the DJ called for the father of the bride to give his speech. Randy stood confidently, glass in hand, smiling as if he owned the room. I watched him from our table, my heart swelling with a mix of pride and affection. He started beautifully, talking about Frances's childhood, how she used to follow him around the yard holding his tools, how proud he was of the woman she'd become. People laughed and nodded. I even teared up a little, grateful that at least he'd given her this moment. Then his tone changed. "And while today is about new beginnings," he said, pausing just long enough for the room to fall silent, "it's also about endings." I frowned. Endings? He looked straight at me. My heart stopped. "I want to take this opportunity to share something personal," he continued, his voice unnervingly calm. "Julia and we've decided to separate. After many years, we realized we're better apart. And I've found someone new." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I heard the collective gasp, the stunned murmurs, the sound of a glass breaking somewhere in the background. But all I could do was stare at him, the man I'd built a life with, as he publicly ended our marriage in front of our daughter, our family, and every friend we'd ever known. Frances dropped her bouquet. Her face turned pale as she whispered, "Dad, what are you doing?" Randy just kept talking, pretending to be noble. "It's time for both of us to move on," he said, raising his glass toward me. "To new beginnings. To new beginnings." The words sliced through me like a knife. Laughter and music had filled the room moments ago. Now there was only silence, heavy, suffocating silence. I didn't cry. Not yet. I couldn't. I smiled tightly, nodded once, and stood up. My hands were trembling, but I kept my chin high as I walked out of that hall before anyone could stop me. Outside, the cold evening air hit me like a wall. I leaned against the stone railing, finally allowing the tears to fall. Every promise, every memory, every dream we built, gone in the space of a toast. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But instead, I took a deep breath and wiped my tears. If he wanted a show of power, he wasn't going to get it from me. That's when I noticed her. At the far end of the terrace stood Cynthia Lawson, Randy's business partner, tall, elegant, red hair shining under the fairy lights. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't even pretending to be surprised. She was just watching me. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I knew. The guilt in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She was the someone else. The woman who'd sat across my dinner table, who'd sent me birthday flowers, who'd smiled at my family as if we were hers. A sharp chill ran through me, not from the night air, but from realization. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed every memory we ever shared. I turned back toward the glowing windows of the ballroom, watching Randy laugh with guests as if nothing had happened. He thought he'd humiliated me. He thought he'd won. But as I stood there, wiping away the last tear from my cheek, I whispered to myself, "You'll regret this, Randy. You'll regret it more than you can imagine." If you were in my place that night, would you have confronted him right there in front of everyone, or walked away quietly the way I did? Let me know in the comments section. For days after the wedding, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. Everywhere I went, I heard whispers. The humiliation Randy poured over me that night spread through Columbus faster than wildfire. I became the woman whose husband left her at her daughter's wedding. So I did what I always did when life became too heavy. I escaped to the lake house at Buckeye Lake. That house had always been my refuge. Randy bought it for me on our 10th anniversary, saying it was where we'd grow old together. I remember believing him. Now, as I stood in the quiet doorway, the air smelled faintly of cedar and memory. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. For the first few days, I tried to find comfort in routine: coffee on the porch at sunrise, old records playing softly in the background, walks by the water until the cold bit through my sweater. But every time I tried to forget, I saw his face. The smirk, the champagne glass, the way he looked at her. I kept asking myself where I went wrong. I'd given him everything: my time, my loyalty, my youth. I raised our daughter, managed our home, and stood by him when his construction business nearly went bankrupt. I even believed his late nights at the office were sacrifices for us. But the silence of the lake has a way of pulling out the truth. One afternoon, while sorting through a stack of papers he'd left behind, I found something strange: an envelope from the bank addressed to both of us. I almost threw it out, thinking it was an old mortgage statement, but something about the date caught my eye. It was just 3 weeks before the wedding. The account balance was off, much lower than it should have been. Thousands of dollars were missing. At first, I told myself it must have been a business expense. But when I started flipping through other bills and statements, the pattern repeated. Withdrawals, wire transfers, payments to names I didn't recognize. It was as if someone had been quietly draining our accounts behind my back. That's when I noticed his laptop. It sat on the corner of his old desk, covered in dust. Randy never went anywhere without it, so the fact that he'd left it behind was strange. Maybe he'd thought I'd be too broken to touch it. He was wrong. The password was still the same: our anniversary date. June 15, 1989. The irony nearly made me laugh. Once I logged in, I opened his emails first. The subject lines made my stomach turn: dinner meeting with Cynthia. Confidential transfer details. Project Haven. I clicked on the folder named Project Haven. Inside were scanned documents, wire confirmations, and letters between Randy, Cynthia, and a real estate developer in Cincinnati. The numbers didn't lie, hundreds of thousands of dollars had moved through his company over the past year. The more I read, the colder my hands felt. This wasn't business. It was laundering. And then came the real blow. Attached to one of the emails was a bank summary, an account titled Francis Bruce Educational Trust. My breath caught in my throat. That was Francis's college fund. The money Randy had sworn would stay untouched. The last withdrawal? 2 days before the wedding. He didn't just betray me. He stole from our daughter. For a long time, I sat there in the dark study, staring at the screen until my vision blurred. The man I'd built my life around wasn't just unfaithful, he was corrupt. Part of me wanted to march straight to the police, to expose him and Cynthia that very second. But another part, the deeper, colder part, whispered that revenge should be served carefully. I closed the laptop, wiped my tears, and looked out at the lake. The surface was still, calm, beautiful. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. I wasn't going to be the weak woman who cried herself to sleep anymore. I wasn't going to beg or plead. If Randy thought he could destroy me in public, he hadn't seen what I was capable of in private. That night, I made a silent vow, I would take back everything they stole. My pride. My dignity. My daughter's future. And when it was over, they'd wish they'd never underestimated me. Would you expose the truth right away or wait until you could destroy them completely? Let me know in the comments. After uncovering what Randy and Cynthia had done, I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Francis's face, the way she'd looked when her father announced our separation. I kept thinking, what would happen if she knew the truth? But I couldn't tell her yet. Not until I knew everything. I needed someone who could dig quietly, someone I could trust. That's when I thought of Marcus Green, an old friend from high school who'd worked as a private investigator before retiring to Dayton. Marcus had always been the kind of man who could find the truth buried under layers of lies. When I called him, he didn't even hesitate. Julia, I'll help. Just send me what you've got. Within days, he started sending me updates, first a few records, then photos. Randy and Cynthia meeting at hotels in Cleveland, dinners in Cincinnati, a weekend conference in Chicago that wasn't a conference at all. But then, one evening, Marcus sent me a message that made my blood run cold. Julia, there's something else. I think you'd better see this for yourself. Attached were photos. At first, I saw Randy and Cynthia again, his hand on her back, her head tilted toward him. I felt nothing by then. I was past tears. But as I clicked to the next photo, I froze. It wasn't Randy this time. It was Bradley, my new son-in-law. He was sitting with Cynthia in a hotel lobby, their heads close together, both smiling in a way that wasn't businesslike. Another image showed them exchanging a folder. The timestamp? 2 days before the wedding. My stomach twisted. I stared at the screen, whispering, no, this can't be real. Marcus called me immediately after. His voice was low, steady. Julia, your husband and Cynthia have been laundering money, yes, but your son-in-law's involved too. He's been helping her funnel funds through one of his tech firms. I'm sorry. The phone slipped from my hand. The floor felt like it was tilting beneath me. Francis. My sweet Francis. She had no idea that the man she just married, the man who promised her forever, was part of her father's corruption. That wedding wasn't love. It was a transaction. All those nights Randy had praised Bradley, saying, "He's a good man, Jules. He's got potential." They'd been planning this all along. It wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated. For hours, I just sat there, staring at the wall. I thought losing Randy's love was the worst pain imaginable, but this was worse. This was watching my daughter's happiness crumble before it even began. I could have gone to Frances that night. I could have shown her the photos, told her the truth, let her world collapse the way mine did. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed proof. Undeniable proof. So, I began to act. I called Randy the next morning, my voice soft, controlled. "I think we should talk," I told him. "Not about us, about the company. I want to help you transition everything smoothly." He sounded relieved. "That's mature of you, Julia. I'm glad you're being reasonable." He had no idea I was recording every call. In the days that followed, I played my role perfectly, the heartbroken wife trying to accept her husband's affair. I sent Cynthia polite texts about keeping things professional and invited Frances and Bradley to dinner, pretending everything was fine. But behind closed doors, I worked with Marcus to gather documents, statements, and every piece of evidence that could tie them together. Every lie they told me became another piece of my plan. The pain inside me hardened into something sharp, not anger, not grief. Purpose. At night, I would sit by the lake, listening to the water lap against the dock, whispering to myself that patience would be my weapon. They thought I was weak, broken, too fragile to fight back. They couldn't have been more wrong. Because now I understood the truth, betrayal wasn't just personal. It was strategic. And if they could plan my humiliation, I could plan their downfall. One quiet move at a time. And when the time came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice or shed a tear. I'd let the truth do it for me. What hurts more, being betrayed by your spouse, or discovering your child's partner was part of the lie? Let me know what you think. The days that followed felt like moving through glass, everything clear, fragile, and dangerous to touch. I woke up each morning with one goal: control. Not rage, not tears, control. I knew what Randy had done. I knew what Cynthia and Bradley were hiding. But instead of running to expose them, I realized something more powerful: they still thought I was broken. So, I decided to let them think exactly that. I called Randy one afternoon, my voice soft, shaky, the way he remembered me. "Randy," I said, "I've been thinking a lot. Maybe it's time I stop fighting. Maybe we should have dinner, just to talk. For closure." He hesitated. Then he laughed lightly. "That's the Julia I remember." "Sure. We can do that." That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and pressed record on my phone. I'd been doing that with every call, his, Cynthia's, even Bradley's. I had hours of conversations stored safely now, each one a piece of a puzzle they didn't know existed. Marcus had been helping me quietly in the background, tracing Randy's offshore accounts and verifying everything tied to Project Haven. The more we found, the clearer it became: Randy and Cynthia had hidden millions. But karma was patient, and so was I. 2 weeks later, I sent out invitations. "A private dinner at the lake house, our anniversary," I said, forcing warmth into the message. Frances was surprised but excited. She thought it was my attempt to heal. Bradley seemed reluctant but agreed. Randy responded with a cheerful thumbs up. Cynthia sent a single-line reply, looking forward to it. Good. The night of the dinner, I made sure everything looked perfect, just like old times. The house glowed in soft amber light, candles flickered across the dining table, and slow jazz played from the speakers. I set out the fine china, opened a bottle of Randy's favorite Merlot, and tucked away my fear. When the doorbell rang, I greeted them with a smile that even fooled me. Frances hugged me tightly. "Mom, you look beautiful," she said. "Thank you, sweetheart," I whispered, my eyes glancing briefly at Bradley's stiff smile. He couldn't look me in the eye. Randy came next, holding flowers, acting like nothing had ever happened. Cynthia followed, graceful, confident, wearing a gold bracelet I recognized. "It used to be mine." We sat down, and for a while, the conversation was polite. Frances chatted about their honeymoon, Randy told old stories, and Cynthia laughed in all the right places. I laughed too, softly, sweetly. But every time Cynthia lifted her wine glass, my pulse quickened. Before the guests arrived, I'd added a few drops of a herbal blend to her drink, nothing harmful, just something to loosen her tongue. After the third glass, she began talking more than she should. Randy shot her warning looks, but she didn't notice. Her words started to slip, little confessions coated in laughter. "Oh, Randy, remember when we almost lost that deal in Cincinnati?" she giggled. "Good thing we had Bradley's account to cover that gap." My heart pounded, but my expression didn't change. I leaned forward slightly, voice gentle. "What deal was that, Cynthia?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, you know, the housing thing. Project Haven?" Randy's fork clattered against his plate. "Cynthia," he muttered sharply, "drop it." But I wasn't done. I smiled, folding my napkin. "Project Haven? That sounds familiar. Isn't that the file you kept locked on your company server, Randy?" The room fell silent. Frances looked confused. Bradley shifted in his chair, his hand tightening around his glass. I reached into my purse and placed a small flash drive on the table. "Funny thing," I said calmly, "I found that file. And everything that came with it." Cynthia's face went pale. Randy's eyes darted toward the door. Frances frowned. "Mom, what's going on?" I took a slow sip of wine, feeling the weight of years lift from my shoulders. "Don't worry, sweetheart. It's just a conversation we should have had a long time ago." And for the first time since that awful night at the wedding, I felt something I hadn't in months: power. Quiet, deliberate power. They had built their entire web of lies, believing I was weak. But tonight, I would show them that I wasn't trapped in it, I was pulling the strings. Have you ever pretended to forgive someone just to get the truth out of them? Tell me below. If you're still watching, hit that like button, it helps me know you love stories like this one. I watched them all across the table, the warm glow of candlelight bouncing off their faces, while I held a calm they couldn't touch. Frances's laughter moments ago had been like music, now it was confusion, her eyes darting between Randy, Cynthia, and me. I took a slow breath and placed the flash drive on the polished oak table. The metallic click echoed far louder than it should have in the quiet room. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is everything." Randy's fork froze midair. Cynthia's lips parted, her hand hovering over her glass. Bradley shifted uncomfortably, sweat forming at his temple. I let the pause stretch just long enough for them to feel it, the weight of inevitability. "I've already sent copies of these files to the state attorney's office," I continued. "Every transaction, every secret meeting, every wire transfer, all of it. Project Haven, the siphoning of Frances's trust fund, your offshore accounts, it's all there. Safe. Recorded. Legal. And public, very soon." Frances's eyes widened. She looked first at her father, then at Bradley, finally resting on Cynthia. "Mom, what does this mean?" Her voice cracked, small and terrified. Everything is gone? Yes, sweetheart, I said softly, reaching for her hand. But it also means the truth is finally out. No more lies. No more secrets. Bradley's face drained of color. Cynthia, however, snapped first. Her voice pitched high, sharp, and frantic. Randy, you idiot! You ruined everything, she yelled, slamming her hands against the table. Do you know what this means? We're finished. This is over because of you. Randy stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Julia, this isn't. I think it is, I cut in, my voice calm but heavy, slicing through the chaos like a blade. You thought I wouldn't see. You thought I wouldn't understand. You underestimated me. He ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. Julia, stop this. We can fix it. We can. Fix it? I repeated, letting the word hang. You've stolen, lied, and humiliated us. The only thing left to fix is the truth. And that's exactly what's happening tonight. Frances let out a sob, her body trembling. Bradley buried his face in his hands, silent. Cynthia's shoulders shook as she realized her charm and composure meant nothing here. I trusted you, Dad. I trusted you, Bradley. And you, Frances's voice broke. She looked at Cynthia, rage mixed with disbelief in her eyes. You smiled at me while stealing from me? Cynthia's breath came fast, shallow. I didn't mean. You meant exactly what I thought you did, I said firmly, holding her gaze. Every transaction, every lie, every stolen dollar. It all ends tonight. Randy's fists clenched at his sides. You can't do this. You're crossing the line, Julia. I shook my head slowly. No, Randy. The line was crossed the moment you humiliated me in front of our daughter. The moment you thought your lies would remain hidden. This is just balance. He turned sharply, storming toward the deck. The sliding glass door slammed behind him, muffling the heat of his fury. I didn't follow immediately. I stayed inside, letting the chaos settle, letting Frances cling to me, letting Cynthia's panic fill the room with her own regret. Then I stepped onto the deck. The night air hit me, crisp against my skin, carrying the distant sound of the lake lapping against the shore. Randy was pacing, shouting words I didn't catch, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. I didn't interrupt. I let him have the space to feel the weight of what he'd lost. You thought this was power, I said softly, almost a whisper. You thought breaking me would keep you safe. But power isn't taken by fear, Randy. It's reclaimed by those who refuse to be afraid. He spun toward me, rage in his eyes, but there was no fear in mine. Only control. Only quiet satisfaction. For the first time since the wedding, I felt the shift fully. The storm had arrived, yes, but this time I was at its center, unshaken, unbroken, and ready for what came next. If you caught the people who betrayed you, would you expose them quietly or make it public like I did? Share your thoughts. Randy's pacing had become a storm on the deck, each step punctuating the chaos he thought he controlled. His hands trembled, his face pale, and his voice rose in frantic loops of no. 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 I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm even as my heart beat steadily beneath my ribs. Randy, I said softly, letting the night air carry my words, you signed everything over to me months ago. He froze mid-stride, a lantern teetering in his hands. What are you saying? He stammered, his composure unraveling. I'm saying this, I continued, my eyes meeting his, unwavering. Bruce Holdings, every asset, every account, mine. Legally. All of it. His lips trembled, a mix of anger and disbelief. That's impossible. You can't. You already did, I interrupted gently, letting the weight of months of careful planning press down. And there's more. I glanced at the laptop sitting on the outdoor table, open and logged in. I've returned every cent stolen from Frances's trust fund. She's whole again. Your theft, your lies, they've undone themselves. Randy staggered back, colliding with the railing. No. Before he could continue, Cynthia burst through the sliding door, her face ghostly, hair disheveled. The accounts, they're frozen, she screamed, pointing toward the laptop. Everything! Randy, you idiot, everything is gone. Randy's hands flew to his head. What have you done? I let a slow, deliberate smile form on my lips. I didn't do anything you didn't already set in motion, I said. You underestimated me, Randy. You underestimated Frances. And now, it's over. He let out a roar, pacing faster, hands clenching, unclenching. The lantern in his grip tipped, the flame licking the edge of the old wooden deck. Randy, be careful, I said softly, almost too calm. But he didn't hear me. He shoved it away, the lantern falling, toppling against the railing and setting dry wood alight. Flames crackled and hissed as they spread with frightening speed. Smoke curled into the night sky, and the heat pressed against our faces. Julia! Randy shouted, panic finally overtaking his fury. You can't, this isn't. I stepped back, letting the fire take its place as the true reckoning. His shouts became screams, sharp and terrified, echoing across the lake. I watched him flail as the flames licked his legs, the deck groaning beneath the heat. There was no one to save him, not me, not Frances. Only the consequences of his own choices. Frances clung to my hand, her small, shaking body pressing against mine. Mom, what's happening? She asked, wide-eyed, terror mingling with awe. Justice has a voice of its own, darling, I whispered, guiding her toward the side steps that led down to the shore. And sometimes, it's loud. Cynthia's cries became background noise as we moved quickly but carefully. I kept one hand on Frances's shoulder, the other glancing back at the fire that had transformed our confrontation into a scene of poetic justice. Randy's screams echoed in the distance, swallowed by the crackle and roar of the flames. The smell of smoke burned in my nostrils, but I didn't flinch. Not anymore. I had orchestrated the endgame, and it was happening exactly as it should. Once we reached the safety of the dock, I paused. Frances's eyes were still wide, but I could see the spark of relief beneath the fear. I knelt beside her, brushing ash from her hair. You're safe now, I told her, my voice low but firm. All of it, the lies, the theft, the humiliation, gone. None of it can touch you anymore. She hugged me tightly, sobbing into my shoulder. I held her close, letting the adrenaline mix with a strange sense of peace. For months, I had planned every detail, every move. And now, in the glow of the fire, I realized something deeper. Sometimes justice doesn't wait. Sometimes, you have to create it. I looked back at the flames consuming the deck, Randy's distant screams echoing across the water. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt whole again. Not broken. Not powerless. The storm had ended. The calm had returned. But this time, it was ours. Do you believe karma has its own timing, or should people create their own justice like I did? The weeks that followed were surreal. The fire had done its work, but the aftermath was far more extensive than anyone could have imagined. Randy survived, barely. He was hospitalized for minor burns and smoke inhalation, but the real damage was far more severe, the kind you couldn't treat with medicine. He lost his company, his assets, his freedom. The law moved quickly once the state attorney's office received the files I had sent. Every fraudulent transaction, every hidden account, every betrayal was documented, undeniable. I watched from a distance as his reputation crumbled. Clients pulled contracts, partners dissolved partnerships, and colleagues whispered behind his back. Randy had once been a man who commanded respect, but now his name carried nothing but scandal. I didn't rejoice, not in the way others might, because revenge had never been about pleasure. It had been about justice. Cynthia vanished almost immediately. One day she was in the city, attending a gala, the next, her offices were empty, her phone disconnected. Rumors spread that she had fled to Europe, that she had liquidated everything and started over. No one knew for sure. Bradley was left exposed, his tech firm's frauds uncovered. Frances's husband faced scrutiny, lawsuits, and questions from investors who once trusted him. The man who had once smiled at our dinner table like a saint was now disgraced, his lies laid bare. Through it all, Frances clung to me, her trust and love stronger than ever. We spent long evenings on the deck of the lake house, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea, and talking about the future. "Mom," she said one night, tears streaking her face but her voice steady, "I can't believe you did all this, for me, for us." I smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You don't need to believe, darling. Just live. That's what matters. Everything else fades." Bruce Holdings had been returned to me, legally and rightfully. The lake house, the place that had been my refuge through so many storms, belonged to us now. Every wall, every window, every memory was mine to protect and preserve. I walked through the offices, signing contracts, meeting with employees, and slowly rebuilding what Randy had tried to destroy. And as I worked, I felt a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes not from anger, but from patience, strategy, and truth. People began to see me differently. Friends who had watched me crumble at the wedding saw a new woman emerge, composed, decisive, fearless. They whispered about my courage, my foresight, my ability to navigate betrayal and emerge unbroken. I didn't seek their admiration, but I didn't hide from it either. For the first time in decades, I felt fully in control of my life. Fully seen. Fully myself. I often thought about the night on the deck, the fire, Randy's screams. People asked if I had gone too far, if I had allowed vengeance to consume me. My answer was always the same: justice isn't measured by what others say, but by restoring balance where there once was none. By protecting those you love and ensuring that betrayal has consequences. I sat in the study one evening, Frances beside me, the last remnants of the fire's smoke long gone. I sipped my wine, reflecting on everything, the pain, the planning, the patience. And in that stillness, I realized the truth: strength isn't just in facing the world, it's in mastering yourself, your emotions, and your timing. And somewhere in the echo of that night, a final memory lingered: Randy's voice, loud, frenzied, desperate, fading into the shadows. And me, standing tall, unshaken. Calm. He started screaming when I stopped crying. Do you think I went too far, or was it the justice she deserved? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where karma finally comes knocking.